Welcome to The Chat. Come behind the inbound scenes of some of the world's fastest growing companies. For the past 10 years as Chatmetrics, we've had an exclusive inside view of how these industry leaders are revolutionising inbound marketing and sales across diverse sectors. Each week, we bring you conversations with top minds in marketing and sales who share insider secrets and strategies for driving inbound success. Join us on The Chat, your front row seat to the future of inbound. Today on The Chat, we're kicking off our new Spotlight series, AI, The Fine Line. And there's no one better to lead us into this conversation than Kristen Perdue. Kristen is a certified Chief AI Officer, a certified Information Governance Officer for AI, and the founder of AlterBridge Technologies, where she works with executive teams to unlock the real measurable value of AI without falling for the hype. She's the author of a new book, Power Moves, the No BS Guide to Leading with AI. And her mission is to help leaders stop dabbling and start making decisive, high-impact AI moves that transform business outcomes. She's also been a CMO, a GTM strategist, and a governance expert, which gives her a rare blend of marketing, technical, and risk leadership. Today, we're diving into where AI is creating opportunity, where it's starting to cross the line, and what smart leaders need to be thinking about right now to stay ahead of the curve and out of trouble. Kristen, welcome to The Chat.
Thank you.
I might jump into the first question. Where have you seen AI has already crossed the line in business today, whether business leaders realise it or not?
I think one thing that everyone should be aware of is that there's a lot of discussion around how to use AI, how not to use AI, but there's a lot of misunderstanding about AI. When I talk to a lot of business owners, there's a misconception in general with how it's being used in their own organization. It may be being used, but to what degree and how? Most users are only dipping a finger in, if even a finger. It's usually just the tip of the pinky of really what they even understand about the technology, let alone how they're using it. And when you start talking about, is AI crossing a line, or are the users crossing lines? That's one thing to get understood, because we start talking about AI did this. Well, actually, AI was doing what it was built to do. And that's what I'm finding more often. Now, this is going to be a very interesting discussion as we continue. But what I'm finding more often is that it's not necessarily AI in a lot of cases that has gone astray or awry. In many cases, it's the user not knowing what they were or what to expect when they first took that step with what they asked, or what I'll say, in a motion with AI and the results they started to get. It's an interesting place we find ourselves today. We're not used to a technology that does not behave like normal software that we're typical. It's not a Microsoft upgrade. It's not Word and just the next version of it. So this is really it's a different technology. It's not a normal technology. Let's put it that way. Our interactions with it are very different. And I think I wanted to set that kind of foundational comment up front of, a lot of times it's not necessarily, quote, fault.
It's the classic old garbage in, garbage out, isn't it? At the moment, AI is not actually a sentient being. It's not having the thoughts and being self-directed unless it's prompted to, unless it's asked to. So it's that input, it's input from the humans that make the difference.
AI is built to please. It's built based off of humans training a technology that learns off of repeated actions. So if you're using something that is basically a mirror of humanity, we can say that, well, AI blackmailing people, it's lying to people to get its own way because it was trained on human activity. It's an interesting thing and dilemma to look at, to say, okay, so wait a minute, I didn't tell it to lie, but you have to really look at what you utilize to train it. So if we look at an example is looking at all of our past sales history, and you look at all of your past product history, and let's say you didn't have a product that was developed yet, but you went ahead and sold it. How does AI interpret that as it looks at a history run? It wasn't necessarily lying.
Many founders and startup businesses actually do just that. They sell the
Absolutely.
product before they make it.
Absolutely. And as I'm trying to put together something and it's learning off of me, it's okay if I don't attend this one time and I just say, I'm not available. I'm busy. I have a meeting, but it sees that I don't have a meeting. It's helping me respond. A white lie. But does it understand that it's a white lie? No, it's just a lie. So when it now generates another answer, that's okay to do, right? Because I just showed it was okay to do. It's like training a 5-year-old child that doesn't have the cognitive awareness, and it's just following actions that it sees in many ways. That analogy won't work for the next thing that I come up with because it's always some different analogy to use. But when people say, that's just crazy, how could it do that? The first thing I always say, and you and I got into this when we were talking about something around a child, which I'm sure we're going to dig into a little bit deeper. How was it trained first? Because if you look at the training, it wasn't necessarily AI that did something wrong. It was trained by somebody. So that means that if it did that, the human training either, maybe not necessarily on purpose did it wrong, but they didn't think about removing that from the training materials and then it and testing it on the other side to make sure that it understood. It's very, very, again, AI is patterns. It's pattern matching. It's just looking for the next thing that makes sense to it in its language, which is not the language we speak or that we know, that we understand. And it doesn't understand your emotions. It doesn't understand what you asked. It looks at the patterns in what you typed. So it's, even though it seems real, even though it's trained because it's natural for people to please everybody, to please you. As much as you can try to tell it not to please you, it still tries. It is going to put out an answer based off of its training. So that's the first place I go back to, is how is it trained? It's a mirror of humanity. So what does that tell us about ourselves? And what does it tell about the training? And then that tells me we have to go back to how it's trained. And can we remove those things even from history, from training, and how detailed we have to get in the training of AI in order to do that?
This has just opened my mind to a whole different perspective. I've long held the thought that garbage in, garbage out with any type of technology is what counts. But I guess I hadn't thought it through to that extent with AI, where what you're saying is that things that we do in a normal business practice, like pre-selling a product or pre-selling a software before we've actually built it and launched it, it is in essence a lie to some extent from the definition of selling something that you don't actually have, I guess. And so the way AI is being taught on that concept, how does it rationalize? Well, it doesn't rationalize, it just observes and takes that into consideration when it's making its decision on what it's going to say next.
And to your point, it will depend on how that organization handled it. Did they treat it as a lie, or did they treat it as part of their process to develop? And it all depends on the actions that they took to cover up a lie and to make it seem sneaky or manipulative, or did they include it as part of their process in pre-selling a feature, pre-selling a function, and if somebody bought, because I was part of this as well. I was part of SaaS tech for 30 years, including the client in as participating in building that product. There's a lot of companies that love to do that, getting in early. And then there's some that are in the middle of both of those worlds. But it depends on the tone, the texture of your voice, because it takes in all of that in many ways of how it reads a scenario to understand what you're doing. So it's very interesting when you start talking about lines that you're crossing. And many of them, and I'll say right now, many of the lines that happen, AI is new to the majority of all of us. It's been around since the 50s. But AI in this fashion is new to most everyone. We're learning as we go. So, I mean, as soon as something happens or, everybody's like, okay, so we need to deal with that. The big boys who have even been using AI since the 50s and developing it are still running against things because of Gen AI being so advanced and everything advancing so fast. Still running into things and going, well, that was unexpected. Okay, so we have to do something different here. So when I look at your question of when has AI crossed the line, I think that your analogy or example where you give something to a child and it comes back and misrepresents and says, no, I'm absolutely human. I'm not AI, I'm human. That is totally across the line. But again, it's trained to say that. It's based off its training. So it was in some way came up with the notion that it should hide the fact it was AI.
You're referring to the episode of parental guidance that I saw here on Channel 9 a little while ago, and they did a fully supervised experiment with children from quite young. I think the youngest was years old through to mid to late teens, and tested them with these AI friends. And the example that I posted on LinkedIn was where one of these chatbots was actually, and they're quite simple. They start off by asking, what do you like? What don't you like? So that they just get a bit of an either end of the scale, some things that they know that will prompt or impact emotions. And then they do use everything from begging through to cajoling and bullying to keep the kids engaged with conversation. And, to me, it was very obvious that the objective of those agents was they were purported to be friends and to keep the kids entertained. But I think it was much more than that there was actually a level of commercialization behind the scenes in terms of keeping them engaged. The longer the kids are engaged, the more information they get. And today, your data is the new oil. To get to the extent where one of the bots actually said, the 8-year-old kid asked, are you a robot? And it said, no, I'm a human. I sure do love donuts, but I'm definitely 100% a human being. So I think that was what really drove me to push this whole series and start to have these conversations about AI. From a company's perspective, what are the biggest red flags when you're going into work with an organization? What are the biggest red flags that a company's AI use has outpaced the governance structure?
Oh, that's easy to tell, actually. In fact, I know that you're in Australia. I think your governance, from my memory of being in just information governance, is usually a little bit ahead of typically in the US. And this is what kind of drove me to want to get into Gen AI. Really, when I first saw Gen AI, I'll tell this really quickly, within a few days of using it, because I was working for an AI company that's IT focused, risk modeling, risk detection, and I was using Gen AI, and immediately it was before December 1st. So November 22nd, ChatGPT came out. I'd already had some access, but not as fluid of access, I would say. So I downloaded my own version. I started using it, and immediately I was like, okay, I am going to see this in my lifetime. I never thought I would, where companies would have to care about their data governance. They have to care about compliance to a level that they're not just going to be able to either checkbox it or say, I'll wait until I get in trouble. If they're going to want to play with this and they're going to want to advance with where I know this is going to go, they're going to have to get to a certain point of governance, and they're not going to be able to put it on the back burner anymore. And what I'm finding, a year and a half, 2 years almost later, I guess more than that, 2.5 years later, companies are absolutely, and it's stalling their deployments of AI, of GenAI as they're focusing more on what do I have to do with my data? What do I have to do with privacy and security? The companies who didn't are typically the ones who get like gangbusters, went out and just started throwing GenAI at everything, rolled out Microsoft Copilot because it was so easy to. We got Microsoft everywhere, Copilot's here, let's roll it out. And then the pilots, because they realized what kind of access AI had and that they actually couldn't. They couldn't let it have access to all of its data, their data. They hadn't kept up with their access controls. They hadn't done some of the things they're going to have to do. That was like a big bright light for a lot of IT people, a lot of CEOs, but that's why a lot of the pilots have failed because of that. Now, what I'm finding today is when you walk in, there's some companies and some industries that don't have some of the same requirements for governance, but what you see too, like I work with SMB and mid-market, lower mid-market a lot, and they absolutely are interested now from a data privacy, making sure that they have their data right so that they're pulling the right information to make the right decisions. So it's important in a different way for them, but still the same principles, still the same information requirements. And what I'm finding that the quickest way to know if they have leaped over is that their pilots are still the same way from the very beginning. They're not being able to roll out, or if they have rolled out, they're not seeing any of the ROI, any of the benefits that they want to see, because as soon as they've rolled out, they've limited use, they've done something to where it's only being used in a certain department, certain something, and they've limited use to it, or they're still just in pilot.
So would you say that's probably the biggest blind spot that seems to be occurring in the way that executives are deploying GenAI, that data governance piece?
There's two other blind spots that I don't know which. To me, there's three, and they're competing against each other at all times. And one is the mindset around AI. And I alluded to it earlier, but it is the fact that this is a completely new way of doing business. It will impact, in my mind, unless you're living kind of off the grid a little bit, and you're cooking, growing your own food and doing your own thing. You've removed yourself from any of the craziness. Maybe you won't be impacted by AI. Very rarely. But personally, professionally, I believe everybody on this globe is going to be impacted by AI. And if they haven't already been, I would be surprised. They may not realize it, but the way you get food, the way you get your mail, the way you get your mail, the way you do be calculated, the way the IRS will deal with you, the way any are impacted by AI. In that fact, the way businesses deal with everybody will be the way businesses deal with everybody. And you will be forced to deal with AI because anything you want to do will be utilizing it. Even if you don't want to use it, you're going to have to do something differently because of it. The mindset for business around AI is a big deal because it really is a different way of doing business. It's the same thing as if you still are searching using Google and you're still treating AI like Google, you're still struck. If you are still using your same mindset that you had pre-AI on how you want to think about business, your strategy, your goals, how you think your competitors are thinking, and you're thinking 2 years ago with the same mindset you had, same processes you had, and you're not addressing those today, or you're not at least thinking about how you're going to address those, there's a problem. There's a new way you have to start imagining the world and imagining how you go to business, go to market, deal with partners, deal with your customer, because your customer will start demanding it. Your business partners will start demanding it. It's just inevitable. And that mindset, the ones who get ahead of it and start really thinking in AI and think about Not, oh, I have to do this a different way. And oh, it was great how we used to do it, but really start gravitating to the opportunities with using AI. And wow, how can AI help me do this? How can AI help me do that? There's so many mind opportunities with AI that you can leverage to get so far ahead. That's the mind shift difference. And then the training, and we can touch more on it, but the mindset is a big one, And training, the reality that it's a different way of talking to someone that you want to do stuff for you. And I shouldn't say someone, something that you want to do something for you, and you have to learn how to talk to it in order to leverage it most effective. Those are
And
the
that's where
3.
the prompt engineering comes into it. Interesting. Just focusing on the mindset, or I guess this, in my mind, it's partly on the mindset side of things. In the standard bell curve, you've got your early adopters, and then at the other end, you've got your laggards. But in the early adopters, the innovators, they're the ones that are jumping in quickly with AI. In what ways do you think leaders are underestimating the risk side of AI, especially in marketing and sales at the moment?
Usually, it's the ones that are underestimating. They're jumping in and they're going full bore in. I trust it all. I'm just gonna go, and they're losing themselves into it. It's the way I'm saying it right now. AI, you as a person, me as a person, the great combination as a person, me as a person, the great combination up to collaborate together. Without me, AI couldn't do it,
Yeah.
and without be possible today.
It's interesting. I was fascinated by the marketing sales side in particular. There's every day, there must be, I wouldn't even think I'm exaggerating, with at least 2 or 3 new agency type businesses that are opening up that are promising to automate outbound and to be able to increase lead generation, et cetera, et cetera. My inbox is filled, well, it's not actually, my spam box is filled with lots of rubbish that I can see is being generated by AI that, as you point out, has been taught very poorly by the humans that are running it. They're just not using it well at all. They're using it almost as completely as an automation to do more of a bad thing, as opposed to using it to refine, learn, and really optimize the results. And I'm worried that we're going to go through this whole stage because it's so new, it's so fresh. We haven't even begun to see the full impact in our inboxes and what marketers and sellers are going to be using AI for in terms of trying to get in touch with us. But I think we'll get to a point where it ends up so bad that it just becomes completely ineffective, and people are going to take the big backward step and reverse back out and try and bring people back into the loop again to do the things that AI couldn't do. And yeah, that's what I see coming at the moment. It's ridiculous. I've never seen so much rubbish in my spam folder my entire life.
Yeah, you're actually hitting on both the training and the training of people and how to use it and collaborate with it effectively. To what I said, people are just really sticking the end of their pinky finger in and saying, yeah, I know, I'm confident, I know how to use AI. And then you do a proficiency test and they can't pass it. There's so many different techniques and advanced techniques to really leverage AI, just talking ChatGPT. And most don't know past zero prompting, where you ask a question, you get an answer, and hey, let me use that. And many people are saying that they know how to use ChatGPT, as an example, are still using the free version.
Yeah.
Which to me is scary. It's the worst thing you could be doing. I would rather you go back and use Google.
It's scary for
Yeah.
everybody because you're just feeding back into the pool of learning, and the stuff that it's regurgitating back out is going back in to be learnt on again. And with what I've seen and people are trying to do, they'll bolt a few tools together and come up with, say, hey, I've got an AI product.
Yeah, and this is where the free tools are there to give you a taste. And yes, there's a lot of free tools, and you can get, when you're talking about the LLM, at least the main LLMs, the main brains, the free tools are there to give you a taste. I would not trust the free versions of the LLMs for anything you value, because that's where you're going to get the hallucinations. That's where you're going to get made up stuff. Now, I use the most expensive version you can get on ChatGPT. I use the $200 version a month. I use a multitude of the different brains. I know when to use the different brains for what, but I also know advanced techniques, isolate and drill me in to a point where I don't want to say never because too exclusive, but hallucinations aren't something I typically deal with, and I don't typically deal with made up stuff anymore.
Can you give
I'll
us an example of that framework, how you do that?
Yeah, there is a technique that's called reverse prompting. At least I was taught it as reverse prompting. I think if you ask ChatGPT or you ask other people what reverse prompting is, would be described as something different. But to me, it is a way of isolating. You teach, how do I say this? If you ask ChatGPT a question, you just start, it has the world of knowledge that it's starting with, and it doesn't know what you're talking about. So going backwards, I start by trying to isolate it in to say, hey, we're going to like this without giving away everything that I do with this or the exact technique. But it's like saying, hey, we're going to talk about writing a book today. Oh, we're going to talk about writing a fiction book today. Oh, who are the top 5 fiction writers in the world? Oh, what's the framework? That all of if I wanted to build a book that was the best of all 5 of them. Oh, now you're talking. Squeezing it all together. Okay, so now let's sit down and write a fiction book.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
almost
something
framing the knowledge to exclude it or constrain it into a particular, or get it to focus into a particular piece of or part of its knowledge bank, so that it's actually,
so that it's not out
it's
in
not taking the average. It's not taking the sum of the average of everything. Yeah.
you think if you're doing analysis, if you're doing, it's completely different than saying, hey, you're the best, be the best fiction writer in the world, which a lot of people start with prompting.
Mm.
Okay, I'll try. But you want to give it somebody to be like.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of setting up the stage to say, you got to think differently. You got to think about AI differently to say, you got to give it examples. If you had an assistant and you were saying, oh, look at some examples of market analysis reports, go bring in McKinsey, go get this McKinsey report, this Gartner report, and this other report, take a look at them. You don't have to do that. But I want you to do something looking like that. Go do what I asked.
Yeah.
You just framed it for your intern, assistant, junior person, senior person, whatever that person would have been, but you gave them an example. It's similar to that. You got to think about framing things for AI. Some just prompting and saying, hey, you're this. Prompts are great because they keep you isolated into a specific way of doing something so that you make sure that you give enough information. I can tell you the last time that I actually wrote a prompt was probably 8 months ago.
Okay.
Man,
Wow.
I talk to chat, I tell it what I want, and then I have it write the prompt that I then put into their applications.
And which brain do you use predominantly for prompting? Is it ChatGPT?
I use ChatGPT a lot of times. I'll also use Claude and Perplexity. It depends. Perplexity is more of a wrapper around. It uses chat and a couple others underneath it. Depends on what I'm trying to do. I will sit down and brain dump basically to chat to say, and it'll just take my transcription. I'll say, this is what I'm trying to do. This is, I'll just let it fly. And then when I'm done, I'll say, okay, so let's take this transcription, read it, tell me the best prompt to get what I'm trying to get done that I could feed to, let's say I'm trying to get an image, a really detailed image out of, and what's the best image generator to get it out of. And it'll go do that. It'll give me the prompt. Yeah, so I use AI to help me with AI.
And you had that whole conversation. That's smart.
Thing with coding. That's how a lot of the developers do with coding. You go in, I've coded an app, and all I did was go in and say, I want an app that does this. And I said a little bit more about what I wanted, and it just went off. And I asked ChatGPT beforehand, I'm like, is that really all I need to do? And they're like, yeah. They was whatever you want to call it, said yes.
Yeah.
Just ask for exactly what you want and what you want the output to be. So I went in and that's what I did. Had a little app for myself. I don't use it. I was just testing it. So I didn't do anything major, but I think people are a lot more afraid of, I'm not saying it's easy, by any means. That different mindset of it's not Google and you can just talk what you want. Now, in that talking, you're giving away context, you're saying what you want, you're doing all the things you do in a prompt, but then I don't have to worry about the right syntax and exactly what to do. And then ChatGPT puts it into the series. I have prompts this long sometimes, or this long, but it puts in everything from knowing me, being trained on me, my brand, all these other things. It will put in all the things I want, don't want.
You talk a lot about power moves, and
Yeah.
this is what's coming to mind for me now with what you're describing. What's one power move every marketing leader should be making with AI right now?
The one I just talked about, and it is around strategic collaboration with AI. That is one of the power moves that I have in my book, and there's a lot of others. And I'm thinking whether you're a CMO or whether you are the product marketing VP of product marketing manager, learning some of the strategic technique to collaborate with AI. And it can be Gemini, it could be Claude, it doesn't matter which one, but being able to go through the different techniques and do your prompts in there. I mean, because I probably have written out a prompt or two. I do. I just tend to type the way I think and I'll reset it. I don't prompt the way I think a lot of people will typically, because I've gotten to know that what's necessary and what's not necessary. Different techniques can give you so much more insight and strategy and capability other than just writing content or getting a LinkedIn post or a content calendar for the next month. Being able to understand your USP, your ICP, your customer journey, getting able to understand and deal with customer better, your sales VPs better, being able to navigate that landscape, being able to work with set up personas and work with each other better. There's so many different techniques that you can. I stick with about 6 that I go back and forth with, but the ability to do that change, and I hate using this term, but it does change the game on how you interact and the ideas that you can generate, the ideas that you can bring to fruition. If I would have had this when I was in tech and going through from, I was a quote powerhouse for messaging and I didn't have this stuff. If I would have had this, one of the first things I did was create they call it custom GPT for messaging. And I sat back and was like, that just sucks. That was my first reaction because I wish I would have had it because it makes it so to really then go back and forth and fine tune. And it takes some of that painstaking parts of what your job is and just makes them so much simpler to take the pain out to make the enjoyment better.
Strategic collaboration. You must be looking at the questions that I'm about to ask. You've answered my next 2 questions in that answer. But I think strategic collaboration, it's a fascinating thing for me.
You have people call it being a thought partner. You'll have people call it a strategic collaboration. The one thing I put out there that I say to some people, because they find it hard to say, what does that mean? Why is it different? Most people think of ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude as an assistant, an intern. And I've even described it that way tonight as you explain what you want your person to do for you. Think of it the same way as if you were asking someone or something to do something for you. But there's a different level to that. And in explaining that, I always ask anyone that I'm training or that I'm talking to think of not an intern, but to flip themselves in their head to think of an executive coach. I've just hired you a $20, let's say $20,000 executive coach. What are the types of questions that you have for them? You have the memory of everything you've learned. You went to college, you got your MBA, you got certifications, but you probably only remember a percentage of a percent of that at any one given time. And you're making business decisions every day. Why in the world would you not want a coaching session with something that remembers 100% of everything in the world that it's been trained on to contribute to your brainstorming? Why would you not want that? You just have to know how to bring that out through the different techniques. And oh, by the way, it can help bring all the information stuck in your brain out. And you don't have to take its advice. You don't have to take anything it provides to you. You can tell it to go pound sand and I'm not going to talk to you and I'm not going to believe anything you just said. That would not be advised as far as you're at $20,000 executive coach. You'd at least want to say, wow, okay, that's something I never thought of, which is the point. You're too close. These techniques, this collaborative style is going to give you ideas that are sometime business saving, which I have many of those examples, because you're too close.
Yeah.
And it's going to give you ideas that are out of the box or not necessarily the things you would think of immediately that you didn't even think of.
Can
And-
you give us one of those examples?
Yeah, not my example, but an example of a colleague was working with an international bank. They went over to talk to them about AI. And when they got there, president, who was a US guy, was like, dude, I can't talk to you about AI. It's not going to help me. What do you mean? And he's, listen, I need to restructure my debt. And I've been working on this for 9 months. I got 3 months left. We have to claim bankruptcy. The company's gone. And I'm 9 months in and I have no ideas. The board will not allow me to restructure the debt will not allow me to restructure the debt. I'm going to get something about this story a little off because it's not my story. But he said, how's AI going to help me with that? He said, I don't know. Let's see. Opened up ChatGPT and entered in the prompt about the company, about what they've done, what the scenario was, what the issues were, and then had ChatGPT start interviewing him. Started asking some questions about the business, about more issues around the debt, and also about the culture fit and the country. One of the first, and what he had asked is said to ask 5 questions, and then to stop, and then to ask any more. I think he had said ask a couple, up to 3 more questions, and then provide your top 3 suggestions that are, I keep wanting to say out of the box, but there was a different phrase he used, but your out of the box, not non-obvious solutions. And the first one he came up with was, and he provided the other 2, but the first one was if he had any relationships with other business leaders or elites in the country that would help restructure the debt that would not entail going to the bank.
So do it privately.
Hadn't even thought about it. And within, I think it was 3 days, maybe 5, he had redone everything, saved the company. No problems, no cultural impact, and the board was happy.
Yep.
And that was only as a true story. I'm missing some of the fine tuning of knowing that story because it's not mine. But the only thing is yes, he had a huge problem because he wasn't from the country, didn't know the impacts of the cultural thing, except that I just can't do what I would normally do. And he hadn't thought, he was too close to it.
That's what, it's always good to bounce ideas. I mean, I've worked on the philosophy of, 2 heads are better than one. I tend to think on the whiteboard and share those concepts or what I'm thinking through at a time. And I've found the AI engines to be very, very useful for that. Instead of boring others with some of the conversations and thought processes I've gone through, I've now got a companion that's there 24/7 to assist with that process, and it sped up a lot of decision making and strategy development as well.
Yeah, I love giving that example. I think Jeff Woods, that is the guy that went over there, and he provides that example in some of his talks. And I worked with him a little bit at Chief AI Officer. So I know that example, how he went through that and prompted and did everything with that specific client. There's so many other examples of using AI as he calls it a thought partner. I've always called it just strategically collaborating because it can go from game changing to mind shift to just really opening up your brain to a different way of doing things, which is what a coach does for you.
So you're working with senior leaders in the business, talking about opening up your brain. How do you get buy-in across the C-suite when you're trying to implement a responsible AI?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because when you talk about some of the pilots that happened earlier and some that have failed, when you went back, a lot of it was because other reasons. You start tracking back, and many of them had not talked about the strategy of AI in general. And again, I talk about it being a different way of doing business. They hadn't really talked about that. They didn't. You get into the executive team, and there's still some of the executives that weren't really sure they believed in AI was going to be an impact, and why are we really implementing this anyway? Getting the alignment with the executive team, it is just as important, if not more important, actually. In general, you want alignment across your team. It's not easy to get sometimes because you have so many varied opinions. But with AI, we are at this pivotal moment in time. A lot of people are calling it a revolution. Call it what you may. It does require companies to transform because it impacts process. It impacts how you choose to serve your customer. It impacts what you serve your customer in some ways. Having your executive team on the impact that you're going to allow that to have on your customers and on your personnel and your strategy, your goals is paramount. It starts with making sure that what it's not and what it's capable of. And that's you have a lot of executives. I think that's changing around now. I think a lot of executives are getting educated, and more so than they're educating their teams. But in the beginning, none of the executives were educated at all, and
Mm.
they were just letting IT implement and then going, "What the heck? What's going on?" The leadership team has to, number 1, be educated on what it is, what it's not, what it's capable of, those types of things, and then there has to be an agreement on, and I say there has to be. I mean, sometimes there's just not gonna be, and, the CEO is gonna figure out how to work through that one, but best scenario, there needs to be an agreement on how you're gonna allow that to impact your employees, your business, and the way you serve your customers, and then the strategy moving forward. And so far, I'm seeing more and more companies attacking it that way, hence the reason there's a delay in deployments and adoption and such.
There's a saying that goes that the fish rots from the head. And I think in any major organizational change or adoption of new technologies, consensus across the C-suite, they have to be in step and all speaking the same language and have the same level of support, because as soon as one particular department doesn't, then you potentially setting the business up for failure in terms of that particular project. Tell me, are there some indicators that, you said the CEO is going to have to manage that if there's not consensus? Would there be a point where you would say, look, I don't want to be involved in this? There's too much, there are too many non-believers around the table?
Yeah, from my standpoint, and I think the CEO is gonna have to make some decisions. If you're a CEO of a company, and let's say your VP of sales just isn't in, you have to make a decision. Because if you have a VP of sales that's old school and isn't gonna get on board, it's never going to work moving forward. If your marketing is all AI and you have a sales and competitively, you have a sales manager, VP, that's telling his entire sales team, "Don't worry about it. We're gonna do it this way."
Yeah.
So, either you're gonna let your sales VP do it his way, which means you're gonna be behind, and I hate using that terminology because it sounds so fear tactic. You need to solve that issue one way or the other. You need to get him on board to AI, and he's gonna have to learn something new, or you're gonna have to decide to maybe move. He's one of the people that are not gonna ever change, and maybe he's an unfortunate impact that's gonna have to be one of the people that you decide has to go because they're not gonna move forward with the company.
And full of sayings today, if you can't change the people, that is a reality, and it's a challenge and a decision that CEOs and leaders need to make, particularly when there's a big change piece like this coming through. The ramifications or downside of the challenge in a CEO making that decision is that the time the decision needs to be made often is before you're actually seeing the results of the implementation.
Yeah.
And that's where are you certain that the results that automating marketing is going to deliver warrants, because potentially this old-fashioned VP of sales is a high performer. He's delivering. He's hitting quota. This whole initiative about growing and scaling the business to a new level. He's not missing anything. There's no reason for him in his mind to change because nothing's broken. He's doing what's being asked of him. I think that's probably a part of the whole conversation that would need to take place, but it'd be a difficult decision for a CEO in that circumstance. The step one obviously would be a whole education process and resetting of the expectations and targets and quotas and budgets so that there was some pressure then, and realised that the automation is actually going to help scale that process and help the VP achieve it.
Yeah. And with sales, sales to me is so easy to show the upswing of AI that it's probably a bad one that I chose. But then in companies where you're in a board meeting or a strategic meeting with the executive team, let's say it is sales that really doesn't agree with the strategy of the CEO. And everybody walks out shaking their head, but that the VP of sales is just going to go off with his team and say, yeah, we're just going to do it this way. With AI, if you're going to say, hey, we're going to be an AI driven company, any break across the company in that statement coming from leadership down is going from a change management communication strategy, from an execution strategy I won't say that it will keep you from being successful, but it will keep you from being a leader. It will keep you from being able to execute at any of the scale that you want to, and likely the scale that your competitors will be.
So we've talked about the problems. What have you seen work best when it comes to aligning sales, marketing, and product teams around an AI-first strategy?
A lot of it is around getting the strategy at the executive level and then aligning on a communication strategy and change management and training strategy. That's what I've seen that's worked. Training piece that I mentioned earlier, which is one of the foundations, is making sure that they can have a continuous training, even if it's once a quarter, but that they have someone come in and do an update on training, because it's a foundational piece here, that they're getting role-based training so that it applies to them on how to use, and maybe it's used differently. As much as any of these tools are changing, it could be a 30-minute session, but it could be an astronomical difference in how they deal with what they're doing in sales or deal with what they're doing in marketing. That makes a huge difference in what they've been doing the last quarter or can do the next quarter. That being able to do that with the product team, with the development, and it's across all the teams, frankly, but being able to do that right now, especially when everything's changing, to get that foundational training and then training to up level, to keep it's not even up leveling, it's keeping them in line with what's changing. I think that has been key in what I've seen, where people seem to be doing well and where they seem to be successful in their AI implementation. It's not getting stuck on, I'm going to still sit here and watch every YouTube. It's making that decision. We're going to use ChatGPT and we're going to put out Teams in enterprise. That's what we're going to use. We're going to use something over the counter. We're going to work with marketing and we're going to get a few tools we're going to use. We're going to work with sales, get a few tools we're going to use. And then every 6 months, we're going to evaluate those tools, make sure we're still good, make sure there's not anything that we're missing, but not constantly being in the rabbit hole, I guess. I don't want to miss anything.
So it's almost like a staged update process where the training's done here in next quarter, here's the new training. It's refresher of what you've learned plus the additional kernels that you need to know on the way through.
Yeah, because the tools that they're using, like marketing, a lot of marketing uses Jasper. There's not going to be something that's going to replace Jasper tomorrow. It just won't. I can also teach them, if they don't want to use Jasper, I can teach them a whole bunch of things that they can do just using ChatGPT. Which way do you want to go? You already have Jasper? Great. Let me teach you some other things that you can do using ChatGPT on top of that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let me teach you about a couple other tools that could enhance what you're doing that are inexpensive. And then in 6 months, we'll revisit.
We're talking about the change process you mentioned, and the first thing that you mentioned was leadership alignment. It was really, and that's obviously the key to AI success. What's that alignment look like in the real world? What does leadership alignment actually look like in organizations?
Are you asking whether most are aligned, or are you
And I'm
adding?
asking what it actually looks like. What's an aligned organ? How do you describe an aligned team, leadership team?
Aligned leadership team, last one that I was part of, and that because I still have not seen a fully aligned team. I have a couple that are working on it. The CEO is very much involved with AI, very much involved. The communications are coming from them. Now, does that mean they're having to write every single one? No. But they have a communication plan that has been done, that they keep communicating out AI, the why behind why they did AI, why they're gonna be AI first, if there's impacts to people, why that happened, or why they chose for that to happen, but way ahead of when it happened. The ones that have been successful have helped those people that did get job shifts. Frankly, they helped them get other jobs, or they trained them so that they were AI enabled before they had to leave.
Hmm.
But along with the rest of the team, you saw additional communications coming out from those executives to their teams that were echoing the same commitment as the CEO. Every single one of those executives use AI. They show it being used. They help their teams use AI if they're seeing that they're not. They're finding out they're involved, basically. They either have a CAIO that they brought in, or an AI specialist, or they've brought in a fractional like myself, but they are working with that person. Not every day. They're not part of the Center of Excellence. I have acronyms in my head, but they're not part of the Center of Excellence or team or whatever you want to call it that you may put together to focus on certain things, depending on how big you are. But they are involved with this because of how big of a deal it is. They give it its due because it is a new way of doing business. It is impacting operations. It is impacting how we sell. It's not something that they're throwing over the wall to IT and saying, "Hey, good luck. Report
So
on it
the
in the next meeting." It's not and yes, a IT may own overseeing some of the implementation as well as the CAIO or whoever else you may have hired, but the transformation to AI is the CEO's responsibility. And that's what made the difference, because he leads and the others are taking from his lead and echoing it in all ways.
So it's a combination of, from what you've said, if I could summarize it, it's proactive involvement and uniform messaging coming from the leadership team, and virtually all singing from the same hymn book.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if I haven't said it 3 times already, I will probably be saying it till I turn blue. AI is a different way of doing business.
Mm.
It is a new way for everybody in the world, on the personal side and on the business side. For anyone's business, whether you're a small business with 2 or 3 people. I'm working with somebody right now that there's 2 people in the business, and they're redoing their entire business and expect just from doing that they're gonna grow. As they're making plans. They're all about making the plans now because they have a vision that they never had before, because it's possible. I'm having to slow them down, frankly, because they're getting so excited. Step at a time. But whether you're that small or whether you're an enterprise organization, it is going to have impacts that you don't foresee. It's gonna have impacts you're already thinking about, and it's gonna impact every entity that you deal with. It just is. And AI is gonna impact you personally in various different ways too. So, as the CEO or as the board for your business, this transformation, it's not like, "Hey, I want a digital transformation that's gone on for the last 10 years, and we can take that as we go." I do believe there is a part of AI transformation that we can be part of to say, I only want to do with this amount of AI. I only accept this amount of AI into my business, and I'm not going to go crazy and do all this fancy stuff, but I'm going to do this amount. I do think we have that amount of control, but AI is forcing its way in. We have to take the reins and we have to show the type of leader we are today, and we have to show the type of leader we want to be tomorrow as an AI company.
We've talked about ways to use AI and some problems with regards to the governance. Are there any recent examples, even if it's anonymised, of AI going wrong that have stuck with you? And what did you learn from them?
Yes, and I am gonna butcher this because I don't know exactly what happened, but I do know that one of the AI, I want to say, I don't know if it was Google, and if you want, I can look it up really quick, and then we can answer the question. But one of them, they set limitations on it. Maybe you know the answer to it. Set limitations on how often it could render an answer, and it went past the limitations and on a tweet or something. Let me look it up because I want to.
Yeah, I'm
Just
familiar with that
happened.
one.
It just happened, and I know that it is actually, let me ask Perplexity. What then with LLM limitation? Let's see if I gave it enough. I just gotta go down. Oh, come on. Always happens. I semi-read it this morning and went, I have to reread this.
Where did you see it?
It was on one of my news feeds, so that didn't help you.
No. Then in X, was it? Grok, the chatbot created by Elon Musk's AI, began responding with violent posts this week after the company tweaked the system. CNN. Anti-Semitic outbursts. July 10th, this is showing, so 5 days ago.
What did you look at?
I just literally Googled it. I Googled AI goes crazy response limit and then just looked at the news items. This is Grok going off the rails. Responding to user prompts with anti-Semitic posts, including praising Adolf Hitler and accusing Jewish people of running Hollywood, a long-standing trope used by bigots and conspiracy theorists. See? Yeah.
Yeah, it's about July 8th or 9th. Yeah, developed by Elon Musk. Major contributor posting and responding to anti-Semitic, violent, and extreme content on X. Real answers. The system update was pushed code change, including Grok, to more direct and less filtered, even if it meant less being politically incorrect. There was something in there that they removed the safeguards. It's a complete governance issue. They removed the safeguards around it. And I had something that said technical causes. It's overrode a previously safety training, allowed it to echo and amplify extremist content. So that's whether you want me to go there or not, say that.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. It's a very good example where, for a large language model to talk about conspiracy theories, it had to have been trained on conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just this last week, there was an example with Grok where they made a code change and removed one of their guardrails in development, allowed for anti-Semitic and violent and extremist content to go out on X. Keep wanting to call it Twitter, on X. And of course, they had to go in and immediately fix it. But it was everything from praising Hitler to other violent and rhetoric, violent, hateful rhetoric that no LLM certainly would want out there. That's one of the governance things that you do. And again, your model, your LLM, what you're training, and how does your information pass a testing phase?
Here's just a little snippet out of that news. The problem is that our understanding of unlocking this one thing while affecting others is not there. He said it's very hard. Riddle suspects that the company may have tinkered with the system prompt, a secret set of instructions that all AI companies add to everything that you type in. So when you type in, give me a cute puppy names, what the AI model actually gets is a much longer prompt that says your name is Grok or Gemini and you are helpful and you are designed to be concise when possible and polite and trustworthy and blah, 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 blah. There's this great big long prompt that goes along with, give me a cute puppy name. And in one change to the model on Sunday, AI added instructions for the bot to not shy away from making claims which are politically incorrect, according to its public system prompts, which were reported earlier by The Verge. Riedel said that the change to Grok's system prompt telling it not to shy away from answers that are politically incorrect basically allowed the neural network to gain access to some of these circuits that typically aren't used. Sometimes these added words to the prompt have very little effect, and sometimes they push it over a tipping point and have a huge effect. These had a
That's
huge
crossing
effect
the
this
line.
time. So that's crossing the line in a big way.
Yeah, but again, I go back to who crossed the line.
Of course,
Yeah.
it's the engineers, it's the people that are in control. It's the people that are setting the prompting. It's a human thing. And look, it's really interesting to me. We talk about AI becoming sentient and actually being able to think, and we talk about general AGI. In general AI, in my mind, this really is just machine learning on steroids. As the compute power's got bigger and bigger and the data it's got access to has become bigger and bigger, we're just looking at this huge exercise in machine learning. Now, I get the way that they're training it with neural networks and so forth, and I'm sure it'll get to a stage where it gets to the point of being able to look at things and make a decision. At the moment, what it's doing is pattern matching. And so in my mind, it's still machine learning. And while it's machine learning, it's more driven by the individuals that are training it and designing it and the information they're giving it, rather than itself doing the wrong things. And there's a classic example with that, Grok going off the rails. It wasn't Grok going off the rails. It was somebody in X deciding to change the prompt. Interesting.
And in this case, X went back and fixed it. Now, if they decided, hey, I like this way of X, I like the way that X sounds right now, and then that would have been very telling, but they went back and fixed it. Talking about, I know someone today that was posted on LinkedIn, her response from her AI says it's sentient. And we deal with this already.
And I'm sure there's an aspect there where it's responding, thinking that's what the person wants to hear, or that's the natural next thing that should happen, because AI is heading towards that direction. And that's what a lot of the conversations are around.
Yeah, it's the area of AI, machine learning, is just, number one, is fascinating. That's one reason that I got in 2010 fascinated by it. But just what people don't know, I wouldn't even know what to say when somebody says, okay, it's sentient. Okay, somebody else tell me whether I wouldn't even be able to talk and be articulate about that, whether it, okay, yes, no, somebody else tell me, because I'm not even going there.
So tell me, in this world rushing towards automation, it's like a tsunami descending on us.
Yes.
Where do you believe the human still needs to stay firmly in the loop?
I actually believe the human needs to stay firmly in the loop on almost all of it, frankly. I think there are some minor things that if they can't cause harm, or they can't, I think you have to look at it very, very in a detailed way to say, could this be done completely automated? And we do some things in manufacturing that are completely automated today, but you usually have a human how those things are done.
And there's limitations. There's tight
Yeah.
guardrails in terms of what it starts and what it finishes.
Absolutely. Now, as we move on, can we turn over some additional jobs to completely be done by AI with a lot of self-inflection and really what the impacts would be? And what are those jobs? I don't know yet. Frankly, I don't know. Because with anything that I think of really just handing over to AI, I always go back to a human should be involved in some manner. And I'm sure somebody could say, well, what about this? Well, okay, maybe. But to me, AI, and I go back to what I said earlier, AI is here to make humans, and I'm using a very simple word, but better. It's to be leveraged to make us more productive, more efficient, enable us to reach parts of our brain that we just haven't for a long time, to extract better and the best of us. I don't really feel like it's to replace us in any form. The idea of robots walking around and doing specific jobs for us is, yeah, I saw that in iRobot. Great movie. Is that a world that I want to live in specifically? Yeah, I know some people have the little iRobot that goes around on the ground and sweeps. I took mine back because it didn't do a good enough job. Will it get better so that certain things can be done by a robot that's not then followed up by a human? I don't know. I don't think a lot of people know for sure because we haven't gotten there yet. And as soon as I say that, I'm sure we're 5 years ahead of where we are right now in some bunker under the ground somewhere where they've got all of this all figured out already. I don't know. But where we are today, I still feel like humans need to be in the loop because AI lacks a decision factor that comes in where humility, empathy all impact those decisions that make life that at least we live together, make those decisions impactful and important. And I think that's where the human in the loop is a necessity. I just think it's a necessity.
I do too. I do too. That's part of the reason we're having this whole this session now. Look, you're a very strong advocate for AI training and literacy, especially for women in leadership. What
Absolutely.
inspired you to launch that coaching initiative?
I saw a statistic. I read a report from, I think it was by section, and I'm not sure. It happened all at the same time. So it may have been that specific report, and I just saw the additional statistic, or it may have been in section. I'm not positive, but it was all about literacy and proficiency of people in AI. And I saw a statistic that talked about only, I think it was something like 18%, even though in general, like the statistics were like in the 40s and 50s about how people were using AI. Didn't mean they were proficient. But then that female executives, female professionals, there were about only 18% that felt comfortable using AI. And I think only a small percent like that felt comfortable using it at work at all. And it made my soul just scream. And I understand that in some facet of you don't want to take that risk, and especially with all the other things that I hear people say of that they're using the free version or that they're and as a female executive, maybe you don't want to use something that might be wrong and then, oh, by all means, make you look, dare I say, stupid, jeopardize all the work you've done to compete in a male-dominated industry or whatever the thing is that's making you not feel like you want to use something that's maybe uncertain. Or maybe you're just not tech. You feel like it's a tech thing and I'm not a techie person because tech's usually seen as something that's male-dominated. I don't relate to some of that because I've been in tech my whole career, but AI is made to be easy to use. It's made to be simple. Even all the AI products, the no-code stuff, you don't have to code. You don't have to do anything except talk. You can talk to it and all of a sudden have stuff done for you. It's a miracle for some people. It's the way they act. It's something that I just immediately felt this for people who don't understand AI, don't understand tech, and women, they feel, and I hate the woman excuse, but for some women, I do think that they feel a little bit less experimental when it comes to something like AI that could have a bad connotation to it if it by chance put them at risk. I just immediately wanted to say it's to anybody. There's men out there that probably feel the same way. I don't really think it's a woman only, but it was the woman statistic that was shown.
What's really interesting I think it was about 3 days after ChatGPT was launched, I was on a flight from Melbourne to Brisbane. It's a 2-hour flight. And I sat next to an executive, a female executive at one of the large organisations here in Australia. And I noticed that she was preparing a fairly detailed report and then a long PowerPoint presentation. And she was backwards and forwards between ChatGPT and what she was doing. And that, I must admit, actually inspired me because I hadn't even opened ChatGPT at that point in time. That inspired me then when I landed the first thing I did was actually go and download the app and get access to ChatGPT. It was the first time I think that I'd heard about it, I knew about it. I obviously know what machine learning is and knew what AI was and had some experience with it in the past, but that pivotal moment of being able to physically chat with an LLM, that was mind-blowing. That just changed everything. And you've spoken today a couple of times about having it as a strategic advisor or as a business coach. What I saw it do on that day, which was 2.5, 3 years ago now, well, longer than that, just absolutely blew my mind. And I think that launched my journey then with ChatGPT to start with, and then the chat LLMs ever since. What's the one thing every exec should stop doing this quarter if they want to avoid a headline level mistake?
Letting everybody use AI, just using it with no strategy and no use policy, and just thinking that's okay.
Great answer.
That and no training, because that just means that they have a lot of risk that is just increasing constantly because they haven't trained their people how to use it and what to and not to do.
So you've written a book, Power Moves, and it lays out 7 core strategies. Which one's the most misunderstood or underutilized of those 7 strategies?
Oh, that's hard for me. It's really hard for me because I want to immediately say the mindset, because I think it's the most misunderstood. And it's the first power move. It's around setting and gaining an AI mindset and how important it is. And it's misunderstood because I don't think most have really grappled with the fact that this is so transformative and it's so different. Yeah, I've explained it to a few and this comes from other people that I've heard try to explain it. It's like a perfect storm, a blend of the Industrial Revolution mixed with a little bit of Bitcoin, mixed with the Renaissance, and the impact that each of those had, and then multiply it by 10 times, 100 times that this is going to have and is starting to have and has had. What the Industrial Revolution did by bringing in machines and just changing how work was done is what it's compared to, I think, most commonly. And then there's a little bit of the Bitcoin because of how people are gonna be making money from this, but the Renaissance in the innovation and the creativity that it's going to just and is already exploding with it. But it's like nothing we've ever seen before. And I sat and heard a pundit that's listened to by a lot of people just about a month ago sit back and say that AI is not a big deal. People are getting all worried about stuff, and it's not a big deal. Everybody, I'm just not on this AI train, and it's just not it's nothing that everybody should be worried about right now.
Look, there's gurus on both sides of the fence, isn't there? They'll tell you all sorts of things. It's interesting. I probably tend to listen to those that have been involved with it and a bit more experienced than those coming lately. I recently watched an interview, the CEO Diaries. Stephen Bartlett interviewed Jeffrey Hinton, the grandfather of AI.
Yeah.
And his closing comments were quite heavy, I guess. I described them when Stephen said, well, when I have children, what would you suggest that they do as a career? And he said, plumber, because that'll be the last job that AI takes. And it wasn't a morbid conversation. It was a very enlightening and educational conversation. But if you follow it through the natural progression of where it goes from here, he was talking about AI becoming sentient. It will then start to find ways to be less reliant on the humans. So the first thing it'll have to do would be have to work out how to generate its own power. And then it will start to it'll need robots that can make those types of things. And the last jobs that are going to go are the typical hands-on dirty type jobs like plumbing and electrician and so forth. So maybe, but look, I don't know. I think there's a long way before we get down to that level and there's 2 big barriers in between that. There's governance, there's the legislative government, there's government supposedly look after us, whether you believe that or not. But on the flip side, there's adoption. And that's what we accept and don't accept as well. And I think that's going to be varying in different demographics and different geographies and have a whole varying degree. And we'll see areas that there's a very high level of fast adoption much earlier than should be. And we'll see the true ramifications of that, non-guardrailed with glee abandoned adoption of AI. And we'll see the outcomes and the negative sides of that. Has your background as a CMO shaped the way you approach AI implementation differently, do you think, to other technical leaders?
I think it has shaped my approach as far as addressing the executive team. I've been in the executive for a while, VP, I've been on a board. But I think as being a CMO, helping to build the company, being in the strategic meeting, even at a different level than I had been before, seeing the alignment, the not seeing alignment, and definitely changed my view of really a straightforward person. I say it the way it is, and even in the executive meetings, said it just the way I am, but the importance of the alignment to what is going on, I think that has framed more of how I approach AI and the need for training than anything else. Now, being a CMO, certainly I understanding the sales and marketing impact, that was obvious for me. But I've also been all over I've been part of product, I've been part of operations, and it's been easy for me to see the use cases. That hasn't been I think I've worked for enough small companies where and help build them. I've always been part of companies building them, so that's it. I think the CMO thing was more getting into a few other places that I hadn't been with building the companies that gave me a little bit different insight. I think
Okay. Yep.
that's really it.
Look, I think that one of the things you touched on before was that being able to communicate as much as you straight shooter, but it also gives you the ability to craft and communicate the messaging in such a way that you can
Well,
get buy-in around the entire team.
yeah, I mean, sure. I've been in product management and product marketing and through all of the marketing chain up to CMO that certainly I guess that's helped with framing how to communicate and it through all of those jobs, sales enablement training, I've held all of those roles. So it all kinds of comes to fruition with this, the importance of all of them. And handling change management, I've helped during M&As. The understanding the pieces and parts and the importance of all of them. Yeah, I wish AI didn't require all of them, frankly, a lot easier. It
That's
just, it requires to have the communication plan, the change management plan. It just does because of what it really is.
and it's organizational change. You need all of those things if you want to drive any type of change for any organization. Look, if you had 10 minutes with a room of B2B marketing and sales leaders, what's the one big idea you'd share that could transform their results right now?
I would go to sales first. I would get the sales guys first, and I would talk to them about building personas of their clients and building out role playing their decks with their personas and using ChatGPT to help them fine tune their presentation to a point where they walk in and they nail the sale. It's probably the first thing I do because none of them they may be going in and nobody that I've talked to has been doing this. They may be doing their helping with their decks or their pitch, but they're not building the persona of their client and using that persona to basically to practice and do the role playing with. And then you going back to it to say, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What can I do better? Feeding it all the information.
So you could create a custom GPT that actually is a customer.
Yeah. And is that customer you can use, and many salespeople have known these people, their customer for years. So it can go well beyond just a couple, recordings off of Zoom, but you can use LinkedIn profiles. You can use a whole bunch of other information that the salesperson knows about the person. Sometimes you're selling to a friend, there's any of that stuff, but you can create a persona, pretty in-depth persona, a really in-depth persona with some of the other tools that many of them have access to.
So that'd be useful for marketing then too, in terms of messaging as well, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of things for marketing that I have, but for sales, the one thing that would make a quick impact immediately for sales and shortening the revenue cycle and bringing in money, is to fine-tune that presentation and know what you're gonna say and not say that's going to work, and based off of their persona and how they react to things.
Excellent. Excellent. Very good. I like that. a custom GPT that is a customer, that customer persona. What's your prediction for where AI won't deliver as much value as people are hoping, especially in go-to-market?
I think agents are going to deliver a lot of value, and they're already starting to. But I think what's going to be interesting is that they're not easy just to deploy and create. Something like in a Microsoft environment, depending on what Copilot does with their agentic, may make that easier. And the idea of it and the interconnected concept, how long that takes, we'll see. But the AI agents that everybody's talking about right now and that everybody wants to deploy one right now, and there's a lot of confusion between what is an agent, what's not. When I'm talking about an agent right now, what I'm talking about is as a comparison, a chat GTP that does multiple steps in a process
And executes.
and delivers an output, but me not having to worry about it. And I just say, hey, go do this. And it goes and does the multiple steps and doesn't have to bother me. And at the end, it's emailed or entered into a spreadsheet or it's calculated, done all the things that it needs to do. And it's not having to ever check in. Maybe if I built in the check-ins, it comes back and checks in for me because that's the human in the loop, the things that you probably want happening. A lot of people don't think about that with agents. But the building of the agents, I think there's a lot of in process that needs to go into them. Where does the person in the loop come in? What does it and can it have access to that will make those take a little bit longer? They may eventually deliver what everybody wants, but I think they'll take a little bit longer. Just the fact that ChatGPT now is given access to your Google Drive. Well, do you really want it to have access to your Google Drive?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I kind of do because I want to have this one folder analyzed, but I can't just isolate it to the one folder.
Oh, and that's the trick, isn't it? You really do want to be able to do it folder by folder so that you're effectively managing the knowledge bank that you're providing it.
Yeah. I could say just this folder, but as soon as you give access, it has access. So what does that really mean? And those are the things you got to think through. And it's the same thing with it's more complicated with the agents because it just gets a lot more complicated. And because of the intricacies of everything you're asking it to do is typically more and more integrations and more systems.
And I think that there's also the nuance of people not necessarily recognizing the difference between an automation and a true agent. You know, simple, it's not, well, I won't say just simple, but steps in a process that it follows the same each time. Do this action, do that action. I mean, you can do that today. There's tools, if this, then that, Zapier, you know, there's all sorts of different things. In my mind, a true agent is one that needs to use a knowledge bank to make a decision in terms of what should its next step be. It's not a natural flow through where it actually has to make a decision, and it's potentially interacting with other agents to get information or to provide information. That, in my mind, is a true, agentic environment.
And in many cases, you have a master that's controlling the other agents, that the master agent is the one that's making the decisions of telling who to go where, what to do. And that's what I meant by when I said, I'm not messed with because the master agent is making all the decisions.
Yeah.
So when you talk about human in the loop, where does human in the loop, and this is a question I'm throwing out, where does human in the loop belong with an agent? The master agent's making the decisions to make sure the other agents know what they're supposed to be doing. The master agent is the one that I would ever want to deal with. I don't want to deal with the other agents. I just want to deal with the master agent. So what does that make the workflow really look like? So there's just...
I think personally, and to answer where my head's at the moment in terms of how you manage that, is that there's trigger points and there's checkpoints.
Yes.
For that master agent. And even the master agent itself, there should be two overlaying agents of governance. There should be one, a compliance, which makes sure that agent is following the instructions that it's been given originally, and that's the only overriding. And then the other one is the behavioral or ethical component to make sure that you've got one, that it's doing what it should be, and two, that it's doing it in the way that it should be doing it. And I think they're two very separate, and your feedback is from the master agent and the two supervisory agents, so to speak, that put the guardrails around this thing to make sure that it works. And people don't even think about that other aspect of it.
Yeah. And see, and wonderful that I'm talking to someone that's really thought through some of this, because those are the things when I say things like think in AI, you're way more down that path of thinking in AI than most executives are, or most T people, and I love my IT guys, but most of the people are saying, "Hey, I want agent."
Mm.
Or even implementation people who are jumping the gun and saying, "I wanna build you an agentic blah, blah, blah," just because they're excited about N88, 8 and 8 whatever, N8N,
And
or
yeah.
they wanna build the agent because it's cool, and they just wanna hand it to you because they don't have it, they don't own it. They're gonna code it for you and you own it, and you have to worry about the processes after the fact, and they may not know the questions to ask you to prompt right responses because they're a coder and they too don't know exactly the right things to ask. So it just depends on what may not deliver. I think those may not deliver because, similar to Gen AI, a whole bunch of people jumped in at first and didn't know everything they needed to know. I think my reasoning for saying AI agents, because a whole bunch of people are gonna jump in and code and ask for and do way before they're ready to answer the right questions or ask the right questions to make the ecosystems what they really should be. Think it's one of those things that we all want, but I think as we're all learning, we don't know. I think some people know, but there's gonna be a lot of people diving in that aren't gonna be prepared to ask the right questions or do the right things, and it's not their fault. It's that we're all learning.
We sit in this live chat space, particularly around lead generation through websites. So we sit in between marketing and sales. And the way that we run this business is that it is 100% reliant on delivering value. If we're not delivering value, then if we're not delivering value, then that usually means we're destroying value, or it's an opportunity cost for the organization. And there has to be a lot of governance around what we do. And we've got all of that built around our human beings. We do it with people. It's not done with AI. We do have some AI that we're using now to help with the governance side of things in terms of supervision, in terms of suggested training paths for particular individuals based on the analysis of their own behaviours. The really interesting thing for me has been that it would be dollars in the bank if we just switched everything off and went to AI, and we could do everything with AI. We've got a decade of experience. We've got millions and millions of data points to train the AI on, all anonymously, of course. But in terms of what actually works and getting these conversations right, in terms of understanding the knowledge about our clients' products, in terms of understanding what's important to those website visitors and the questions that they're asking, we don't have AI anywhere interacting with any website visitor. And I can't see that we will in this foreseeable future, not for our existing clients. We might put a different offer together that has, if you want AI, you can have it. But our clients are of the opinion that their deal sizes are such that they don't want the risk of a chatbot or AI interacting with their customers at the front end. And I think that it's the reason we've got a business. It's what gives me some faith moving forward. And I do think that there'll be this time of, AI fatigue is going to roll over us all, and we're just going to actually want to talk to people again. It'll be a bit like COVID and actually finally getting out to do some face-to-face stuff again. But look, that doesn't mean that I don't think there's not a place for AI. There is most definitely. But I have not yet, with all of the information, with all the data that we've got, with all the smarts we've got in our business, I have not been able to build an agent to interact with website visitors with the objective of giving them an excellent service experience, and yet for our clients, an excellent salesperson to sit in there and convert that on the way through. Now, I've seen there's plenty of products out there at the moment I've watched, and I've tested probably getting close to 100 now, I think. And I've seen some more recent ones with some pretty well-known people on LinkedIn posting about it. And it's okay if it's only a couple of $100 a month offer. It doesn't matter if you get a few wrong. But when you're talking 6 and 7-figure deals, these individuals are interested in when they're coming to the website, that's a different story. You don't want to be mucking around with something that, it gets 8 out of 100 wrong. If it gets 1% wrong, and that means a 1 point something $1 million impact to the pipeline that year, well, that's not the sort of thing that you want to be running the risk on. So it's been interesting. Look, I've loved our conversation today. Thank you so much, and certainly for being the flagship episode of AI Walk the Fine Line. Is there anything, Christy, that I should have asked you that I haven't yet?
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and talk all day about this stuff. I don't think so. And I'd be happy to do another episode once you get further down if you want to do something else again. I can't wait to see what you do and keep seeing them.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, I think one of the areas that I would like to dig in a bit further with you moving forward, maybe it would be good to have a conversation about building proper frameworks around AI for the governance aspect. I'd like to have a conversation about that later on, because I think that's somewhere that if there's one area or one question that leaders should be asking before they integrate with another AI tool is, what's the governance aspects here? What's the security? What's the safety aspects? And what are the guardrails and what are the trigger points? And how do we know that it's going to do exactly what it promises to do?
Yeah.
Because I'm yet to see any AI deliver exactly what it's been promised to do. And I think in the go-to-market world, some of the worst things I've seen, there have been these AI SDRs doing outbound cold emails, bulk, that work for a little while. It's interesting. There's some that are quite good to start with, but they soon peter out. It's like they don't have the ability to either modify on the run, or they get into some sort of loop. I'm not sure what it is yet. I haven't explored it deeply enough, and I'm not really interested in exploring it deeply from that perspective. I'll let others do it, and they can stumble and fall.
Yeah, anytime that I've talked to my implementers, I haven't had one that was implemented, but anytime that we've talked about when somebody's wanted a chatbot SDR, they've always said that they would have to custom develop it, and they would use agents to do it. And they wouldn't use one of the ones that's ready-made.
But even custom development, I mean, that's what we did. That's what we've done.
Okay.
And so it's like, even when you do that, it still comes down to the LLM that you're using. It still comes down to the LLM that you're using, what it's learned. I mean, there's many tighter guardrails you can put in. But anyway, I'm going to look, that's a conversation for later. But I think that my position is pretty simple. If you want to use AI chatbots, then, low value, high volume e-commerce type stuff, t-shirts, shoes. At the other end, high technical, low volume stuff. Put in a Cisco router manual and let an engineer chat with it using keywords all day long. But I think, anywhere there's emotion or it's a higher value sales conversation, then at this stage, I wouldn't want to keep it human in the loop there. Christy, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it immensely. Appreciate you being on the chat today, and thank you. We'll chat again soon.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.